Hey guys, welcome to Tianshi Recaps. I'm your host Tianshi. Today we're exploring a horror-filled world of Japanese urban legend movie, Kisaragi Station. The scene opens in a dense shadowy forest. A girl, her dress torn and tattered, stumbles forward, her steps heavy with pain. Her breath is ragged, fear glistening in her eyes. Cut to black. Fragments of aged newspapers flutter across the screen. Headlines scream in bold letters. Mysterious disappearance in Japan, 2004. Vanished girl reappears in 2011, untouched by time. 7 years missing. But not a day older? The camera shifts to a dimly lit train carriage. A girl, Hasumi, scrolls through her tablet, her face illuminated by the eerie glow of the screen as she reads the unsettling news. Hasumi, a final year student, had spent weeks researching this case. To uncover the truth, she decided to meet the girl herself. She arrived at the house, her mind buzzing with questions. As she waited, the door creaked open and 2 young women stepped out. Their expressions were warm, their gestures inviting as they welcomed her inside and offered her a seat. The house was quiet, yet an unsettling presence lingered. Hasumi's gaze wandered, drawn to a nearby room. She noticed stacks of newspapers pinned to the walls. Before she could examine them further, footsteps echoed softly. Sumiko had arrived. With her recorder in hand, Hasumi began the interview. She asks personal details, then moves to the incident. On January 8th, what happened? January 8th, the night Sumiko disappeared. Sumiko took a deep breath, her fingers tightening on her lap as she recalled the events. She had worked late, as she often did. Being a teacher, it wasn't unusual for her to stay behind finishing lessons or grading papers. It was late when she finally left, boarding her usual train home. She settled in, distracted by her work, flipping through her notes as the train moved steadily forward. Then something changed. A sudden shift in motion. The feeling of entering a tunnel. At first, she thought nothing of it. But the darkness outside seemed endless, stretching longer than any tunnel she had passed before. The air inside grew heavy. A strange stillness settled over everything. Then, without warning, a blinding light burst through the windows. Her heart pounded, and then silence. She looked outside, her breath caught in her throat. It was morning. She had boarded the train at night, but now daylight streamed through the windows, illuminating an empty landscape. Panic set in as she glanced around. The train was eerily still. The usual murmur of passengers, the rustling of newspapers, all gone. The seats were empty, except for 5 others. 6 passengers in total, including herself. The rest had vanished. Fear clawed at her chest as she stood, hesitantly walking through the compartments. The silence was suffocating. She stopped beside one of the passengers, a young girl, Miyazaki, curled up in her seat, unmoving. She shook her awake, and when she opened her eyes, she was just as terrified as Sumiko was. The train screeched to a stop. The sign outside read Kisaragi Station. That name didn't exist in their town. As all stepped onto the platform, the train doors shut behind them. The moment their feet touched the ground, the train lurched forward and disappeared into the distance. 3 of them, Kaido, Ken, and Hinata, cautiously entered the station. The place looked abandoned. No station staff, no passengers. That's when Sumiko noticed Mia's uniform. It was the same as the students at her school. She was one of her students. The familiarity should have been comforting, but Mia's face had gone pale. Her eyes widened in terror as she stared at something behind Sumiko. Sumiko spun around. Nothing, just empty space. She placed a reassuring hand on Mia's shoulder, whispering that it was all right. But the fear in the girl's eyes didn't fade. With no other choice, the 6 of them left the station and walked into the town. But the moment they stepped past the threshold, dread settled deep in their chests. The town was empty, not a single person in sight. The only sound was their own footsteps echoing against the vacant streets. Suddenly, Kaido broke into a run. Ken was gone. No one had seen him disappear. Kaido's face twisted in fear. He didn't stop to explain. He just grabbed Hinata's hand and says, "We need to leave now." Without waiting for the others, he dragged Hinata toward the tracks, desperate to escape whatever had just taken Ken. Sumiko and Miyazaki hurried after Kaido, desperate to escape. But Boten, the man in the coat, refused to follow. He stood firm, insisting that the train would return for them. With no time to argue, the others pressed on, walking along the endless tracks. Hours passed, but there was no end in sight. The further they went, the more the world around them felt unreal, like a place that shouldn't exist. Then, a phone rang. Everyone froze. The screen showed Ken's name. Shock rippled through them. Ken had vanished without a trace. How was he calling? Kaido's voice trembled as he warned them not to answer. But Hinata, despite the fear in her eyes, picked up. The moment she did, a picture flashed on the screen. It's Ken, brutally mangled and dead. A sharp gasp filled the air. Then from behind them, rapid footsteps. Boten came running, terrified. His face twisted in panic as he begged for help. But before anyone could react, his head swelled grotesquely and exploded. Horror paralyzed them, began to run. Their lungs burned, legs aching, but fear kept them moving. Then from nowhere a voice echoed, "Don't stand on the tracks." Below, near another track, stood a man with a stick. Before they could speak, Ken appeared. His face twisted in agony. "Help me," he pleaded. And then in 5 seconds, the man with the stick was suddenly right in front of them, unnaturally fast. His grip closed around Hinata, his laughter echoing like a nightmare. Then a deafening blast. Hinata, the man, and Ken all vanished. Kaido, Sumiko, and Mia were the only ones left on the track. Fear turned to madness. Kaido, desperate to survive, believed only one could escape, and it had to be him. Without warning, he attacked. The knife plunged into Sumiko's leg. She screamed in pain, but before he could strike again, she drove a pen into his leg. Kaido collapsed, howling. Sumiko didn't wait, she ran. Blood trailed behind her as she pushed forward, her wounded leg barely holding up. After what felt like forever, she reached a tunnel and, exhausted, she couldn't go any further. She turned to Mia, her voice strained. "Go get help." Mia hesitated but then ran, disappearing into the darkness. Sumiko leaned back, breathing heavily. Then footsteps, not Miyazaki's, it's Kaido. He dragged himself forward, eyes wild, knife still gripped tight. He was here to finish it. Sumiko braced for the worst. But then Miyazaki returned. She never left, she came back to fight. Kaido let out a scream not human. The tunnel shook and the lights shattered into darkness. Everything went black. Sumiko fumbled for her phone, fingers trembling as she turned on the flashlight. Kaido hanging from the ceiling. From his skull something grew. A grotesque writhing root, it was pulling him upward. Terror hit them, they ran, bursting out of the tunnel and collapsed onto the tracks. It's finally over. A car approached, relief flooded them. Sumiko and Mia think they've finally escaped when they find a car and ask the driver for help. As the car moves, there's a brief moment of relief, until the driver suddenly turns, his eyes pure white. Without warning, he lunges at them. The nightmare isn't over, they were never out. Fighting him off, they break free and sprint into the forest. But the terror follows. In the distance, a village appears, a mirror image of the deserted town. No signs of life, just endless silence. As they search for an escape, Sumiko spots a glowing portal. This could be the way out. They rush toward it, hope returning, until he appears again. The car man, even more monstrous, blocks their path. His attack is brutal, unrelenting. Sumiko is seconds away from being completely consumed when Mia saves her just in time. Then the true horror unfolds. Figures emerge from the darkness. The dead passengers, Kaido, Hinata, Ken, Boten, all of them now ghosts. Their blank stares confirm the terrifying truth. Death here means eternal entrapment. No one leaves. Sumiko refuses to let Mia die here. No matter what happens, she will save her. As the ghosts close, she grabs a log and fights back against the ghosts with everything she has. She screams for Mia to run. Terrified, but with no choice, Mia runs. She dives into the portal just as it explodes behind her, sealing shut. Suddenly, Sumiko's hands begin to change. Her nerves twist. Something is happening to her. Then a flash cut. She stands alone in the forest. This is the woman we saw at the beginning of the film. The horrifying truth is revealed. Sumiko was trapped in that nightmare world for years. She vanished in 2004 and returned in 2011. For her, it was just a single night. And Mia, the escape was a lie. She never made it back to the real world, only Sumiko returned. Sumiko finally reveals everything to Hasumi, recounting the horrifying events she endured. As the story ends, Hasumi asks a simple yet chilling question: what was the name of the train? But Sumiko's answer is even more unsettling. It wasn't just one train. On her way home that night, she fell asleep and missed her stop. To return, she boarded another train, only to fall asleep again, wrong station. Again, another train, another mistake. 3 times, and on the 4th she arrived at Kisaragi Station. A cold realization washes over Hasumi. This wasn't random. She explains a belief from their town, the elevator game. If you're trying to go to the 4th floor, but instead the elevator takes you to the 10th, then you try again, but it stops at the 6th, then the 8th, and finally the 4th. A sequence that isn't direct, but instead follows a strange, unexplainable pattern. That's when the shift happens. Hasumi believes Sumiko unknowingly followed a similar pattern with the trains, slipping into another dimension. As this chilling revelation sinks in, someone else is listening. The girl who invited Hasumi inside, she's Sumiko's brother's daughter, and she's heard everything. After years of failed attempts, Sumiko could never return to Kisaragi Station to save Mia. No matter what she tried, the path never reopened. Now Hasumi has all the details she needs for her project. But instead of heading home, curiosity pulls her toward the train station. She follows the exact steps Sumiko described, mimicking the same strange sequence of mistakes. Station after station, wrong train after wrong train. And then it happens. Just like before, the train enters a tunnel, swallowing everything in darkness. When it emerges, morning light floods the windows. The same passengers, Boten, Kaido, Hinata, Ken, and Mia. The train slows to a stop, Kisaragi Station. But this time Hasumi is in Sumiko's place. Everything unfolds exactly as before, the fear, the confusion, the eerie silence. But there's one difference. Mia turns in fear, sensing something behind her. In Sumiko's experience, there was nothing, but Hasumi sees it. Blackened roots slithering through the cracks in the walls. She knows what's coming next. She knows what happens to Ken. This time she tries to stop it. Hasumi changes fate. Ken survives, but the horror shifts. Kaido meets a brutal end instead. Now Hasumi knows the truth. She can alter the story. With the timeline shifting, Ken takes Kaido's role, leading them along the tracks while Boten waits behind just like before. As Hasumi follows, phone rings. Last time it was Ken's photo, but now it's Kaido who is brutally dead. Boten collapses behind her, struggling for breath. Hasumi rushes to help just as black roots snake toward him, the same fate that claimed him before. Not this time. She pulls him away. Then the old man emerges from below. In seconds, he's towering over them, ready to strike. Just like before, instead of Ken, Kaido appears and grabs Hinata, but now Hasumi fights back. In Sumiko's version, Hinata was taken, both exploding into oblivion. This time Kaido is the one pulled in. The old man and Kaido, both erased in a violent blast. Hasumi and the others sprint through the tunnel. The same eerie car appears, but she knows the truth now. Without hesitation, she picks up a stone and smashes it into the ghost's head. Seizing the moment, they hijack the car and speed away. But the nightmare isn't over. The ghost suddenly reappears, crashing in front of the car. Panic sets in. Everyone bolts out except Boten. Curious, he hesitates, opening the door to check. The ghost is gone, or so he thinks. It's already inside, right behind him. A sharp gasp. Boten is dead. As per Sumiko's story, a village should be ahead in the forest. But the path has changed. Instead, there's only one lone house. Seeking shelter, they rush inside, locking every door and window. But they are not alone. Kaido's ghost is waiting for them. Outside, more spirits gather, surrounding the house like vultures. Hasumi's only focus is saving Mia. She dodges through the chaos, dragging Mia away from every deadly grasp. Then a way out. At the back of the house, a portal shimmers in the darkness. Hasumi stops. Sumiko's warning echoes in her mind. The portal doesn't lead home, it traps here. Now she has to decide, save Mia or save herself. Hasumi hesitates. Then she makes her choice. She pushes Mia toward the portal to go. Mia steps in. The portal remains. Confused, Hasumi takes a breath. Maybe she was wrong. She runs toward it, but before she can reach it, the portal vanishes. Here comes a twist. Hasumi is still trapped. Mia steps out in the real world. As Mia steps out of the portal, Sumiko is already there waiting. And then the shocking truth is revealed. Everything Sumiko told was true. The horrors, the ghosts, the nightmare of Kisaragi Station. But she lied about one thing. The portal was never a trap. It was the only escape. Years ago, when Sumiko entered that portal, she was the one who escaped. But the guilt of leaving Mia behind haunted her. She became obsessed, searching for answers, desperate for a way to bring Mia back. And then she discovered the cruel truth: only one person can leave. If Mia returned, someone else had to take her place. Sumiko had to save Mia without sacrificing herself. That's when Hasumi entered the picture. Curious and determined, Hasumi was the perfect target. Sumiko fed her the story, knowing she would follow the exact pattern and walk straight into the nightmare. And just like that, Hasumi was trapped, Mia was free. But the horror doesn't end here. Sumiko's brother's daughter overhears everything. A fame-hungry vlogger, she sees Kisaragi Station as the perfect viral sensation. She gathers her friends, boards the train, and sets off to capture the legend. As the train reaches Kisaragi Station, the screen fades to black. The nightmare begins again. Hope you enjoyed the movie. Until next time, stay curious and beware of forgotten stations. Bye!